Alright guys, it's time for another review video, and I'm going to be discussing the BINTI trilogy in this video. Spoiler free, even if I refer to a specific book, I'm not going to allude to major plot points. That's not the plan, and if that plan changes, I will warn you very clearly so you can escape. But per usual, if you wanted my quickie recommendation, don't want to know anything, I think if you are looking for a thematically heavy, unique sci-fi world-building book series, this might be worth your time. It's only 300 some pages, and I do find that it has really great work in theming and world building. That is to say, though, it's like a 3 to 4 star series for me. Some of the books were 4 stars, some were 3 stars. I'm still unclear of how I feel about the ending of it. And as we all know, endings for me are kind of a big deal, but if you just wanted my surface level thoughts of whether you should read this or not, definitely don't go into it expecting a straightforward plot, is what I would say. So let's get into like the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of it. Things I think this trilogy does spectacularly. Themes. I think that the themes are what kept me in the story, especially through BINTI. BINTI is our character perspective. We have a first-person perspective of BINTI, and at its core, this story is about BINTI, who is a Himba. Himbas live on Earth in a far future time. They are based in Africa, I'm pretty sure, and they wear clay on their skin. It's called ogize, I'm pretty sure. At least that's what it said in the audiobook. And she would be the first Himba to go away to this great big university. And that'd be a big deal because Himbas don't leave their homeland. They're very technologically advanced, but they stay home, they stay local and isolated. And so she wants to go out, though. She wants to go to this university called Uni. And on this journey of going to this university, she has to struggle with a lot. Events make her struggle to understand her identity extreme. Her identity as a Himba person, her identity in the universe overall. As she learns more about herself and as circumstances change her, she has to struggle with individuality and tradition warring inside of her. And that is ever present in all 3 books. And it's kind of a very relatable story, even though you can't relate to anything that's happening to BINTI, like at all, because it's very sci-fi, but like she's 17. At the age of 17, I mean, that's when you have to decide what traditions are important to you. That's when you decide, you know, how individual are you? How far removed from your family do you want to be? All of those decisions happen when you're 17. And so in that sense, it's very relatable. There's also a lot of mental health themes because of events that happen. BINTI has PTSD. And exploring that and exploring her anxiety attacks has been really interesting. And I mentioned in a vlog, I read the 2nd book, which really, I think, talks about the mental health themes the most. When I was having a week with anxiety attacks, it was election week here in America, and that was probably the longest Tuesday of my life. But getting to read the perspective of BINTI, handling her anxiety attacks while having my own anxiety attack was actually quite cathartic for me. And, you know, bringing light to the idea that mental health is normal and dealing with it is normal, and BINTI is still like a phenomenal character, and she's still doing everything she can for her friends and her family. I thought that was really great. So themes of identity, of mental health, of prejudice. Oh my gosh, there's so much prejudice in this book, and it leads to wars, and it leads to needless isolation from each other. It leads to not spreading ideas and joining them together, and BINTI is like the antithesis of that. Like, she has prejudice, but she learns about her prejudice and kind of fights against them. And yeah, I just thought that was a theme that was also done really well in this book. So in terms of like thematically speaking, I thought this work was really great. And also I thought the sci-fi world building was wonderful. It's kind of something though that I feel like not everyone would love in sci-fi. So it is, in my opinion, so far future and so advanced that the technology almost feels like magic. Media Corafor does not try to explain everything. You actually just have to go along for the ride, kind of a lot like what I liked about 9 Fox Gambit. And I think that's okay. In each book, you kind of get a little bit more insight, but you never get a complete understanding. But I love how advanced it is to the point where it's almost magic. I think that's really cool. Like, literally, the imagination knows no bounds. You have ships in space that are living creatures. I think that's really cool. BINTI can create currents by using mathematical treeing, which I still can't really explain, but I just think there are sci-fi elements here that I really appreciate, because sometimes I think in sci-fi people try to stay close to what we do know and try to go off from there. And although that's fine, there's so much we don't know. Why not imagine the impossibilities? Because then maybe it gets you one step closer to what could be. I like when you can really push the boundaries of that. But that might be too much for some people, especially the lack of explanation. Some people might be like, well, why isn't this just fantasy then? If you're me, you think, well, magic and sci-fi are they're like the same thing. I became a physics major when I was in college because I wanted to study how the universe works, and I wanted to be a wizard, and the closest thing for doing that is to be a physicist. That's what my brain did. So magic, physics, same thing. So yeah, so the world building I really like, and on a reread, I feel like the world building and the themes would only be enhanced. Like, I'm contemplating purchasing the bound set to re-explore this, because there's a lot I don't think I took in on a first read, especially since I primarily used audiobooks because the narrator is phenomenal for the voice of BINTI. Really made BINTI more of a character for me. And I think that starts to lead me into things that I thought weren't the strongest in these books, and one of those is characters. Or specifically character relationships too, but I didn't feel till I had the audiobooks giving me the speech patterns of BINTI's thoughts that I really could, I don't know, feel BINTI as like a person. And I know that might sound weird, but I just felt like the character work of BINTI purely on the page wasn't amazing for me, but then the minute I switched to audio, I felt so connected to her. So the narrator was just like phenomenal. I will also say, when I read the first novella, I was kind of in like a tired week, so that could have also been me. But something for sure that happened in both the audio and physically reading it was BINTI has a friendship with this character, and I don't understand the friendship. I've read all the books, and BINTI is this master harmonizer. She is this himba who really does want peace. So I can get her maybe not holding a grudge as much as I hold a grudge, but this character did some bad things, and I don't get to see that resolution of her going from where they were at with conflict to friendship. Like, I don't get to see that. And then, sure, maybe don't show me that, these are novellas, but then while they're together, there's some tension sometimes, but for the most part, they really are like best friends, and I don't understand it. Like, I just don't. And I think what happens with the character relationships in particular is they are told to me and not shown to me, which is just never my favorite thing. Particularly in the third book, there's a lot of fast character relationship development that we are told the new state, and you saw the old state, and you don't get to see the transition, you know? You're like, oh, they just met. Oh, now they're like this. And like, but how did we get from A to B? No one tells me, so, or they tell me, but they don't show me. And that's one of my favorite things about reading books with characters, is I love watching that journey. The weakest part of the book for me is the plot. The plot is complete whiplash. The plot is, you think you're in one story narrative, and then it switches to a different one. And then you're like, fine, I'm used to this. And then it switches to a different one. And then it switches so quickly. It's very jarring. And I don't know if I mind that, but a lot of the times everything felt really convenient and random all at the same time. And never was this worse for me than in the last BINTI book. There were choices made that I just didn't like. I didn't like it. And because then I didn't have the character investment, I didn't like the ending. The ending, for all the stakes that were put into this book series throughout the whole point of it, there were lots of stakes. There were huge things at stake here. Wonderful moments that BINTI had, emotional moments for me and BINTI. And a lot of it felt kind of almost erased by the end of the book. And I just don't like that, and I don't hate it, but I didn't like it, is really where I stand with the ending, is that for me, it didn't work. It works for the idea of BINTI's journey of self-discovery. But because we have these plot elements that keep raising the stakes and keep making things crazier and crazier and more involved, and then to have the payoff be what the payoff wasn't great. I wish it had stayed introspective. So like at the beginning of BINTI Home, you're still kind of in a story that makes sense, in my opinion, about following BINTI, figuring out her spot in the world. Like she went to Uni and now she's coming home to make sure she's still a himba, and she, there's a struggle with the family, and then there's just stuff happening. And then it just kind of dials up to like 1,000 and there's these huge implications, and the role of BINTI is large, and then we just don't think about it anymore, really, or it's like a really small asterisk at the end of the story. And then there's this huge mystery. Well, it's not like huge, but it's definitely a consistent mystery throughout all 3 books, and the payoff was real mediocre. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't love it. I just didn't. So for me, the ending didn't have payoff. So the 3rd book for me was like my least favorite by far. But it doesn't like take away from the themes and the world building. And I think, you know, on a reread, knowing what to expect, I don't get as invested in the other things that bothered me. And also it's very short. So I don't know, I guess to summarize, BINTI was a low 4, BINTI Home was a solid 4, and the 3rd BINTI was a 3-star, kind of middle 3-star. And that's kind of where I land on the series. I do not regret my time. I think I'm very excited for when Nidia Okorafor writes me an adult novel. I know they've written lots of middle grade and I think some young adult, but I'm really excited to see what their sci-fi imagination does in the adult space, because like I said, it's one of my favorite parts. Like, her imagination knows no bounds, and that was so intriguing to me. And I think that's one of my complaints is, you know, man, if each of these were a book length long, we could have done a lot more. Maybe the plot whiplash wouldn't have been as bad because we could have had transition points. You have more pages, I get more character development. So making it longer could have solved all my problems. So I'm really excited to see what she does in the future with future works. So that's this review. If you've read the BINTI trilogy and want to talk about it, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. But if you do talk about specific events in books, please put spoiler tags. I really don't want anyone to be spoiled, especially with the crazy stuff that does tend to happen in the plots of these books. Feel free to argue with me about the ending too if you really liked it. I could see it going either way. For me, I've thought about it for a few days and it really just didn't work. It just didn't work for me. But like I said, that's really subjective, and I would still check this series out if it's at all interested in you, if only to see the world building that Nidia Okorafor brings to the page. It is quite stunning. And with that, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.